You're watching Public Comment, a vlog by Sean O'Connor, which focuses on politics, culture, and self. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to talk to you briefly about the stability of the Republican obsession with subservience of sorts to President Trump. I also want to talk to you about the blessing and curse, if I may be a bit rhetorical and hyperbolic here, of the freedom of productivity. And I also want to talk to you about my slow but steady development of thoughts on crafting and on the aesthetics of the video blog, both as a means of effective and meaningful communication, as well as an artistic medium. Republican Congressman from Michigan, Justin Amash, and Fox News' Chris Wallace recently offered a slight iota of additional criticism aimed at Trump from the Republicans and the conservative media, which I find it's at least a little bit uplifting, though by no means am I deluding myself here with notions that this means there's a significant crack in the egg, so to speak, of President Trump's strange support. So yesterday, Representative Amash tweeted this, quote, "Here are my principal conclusions. 1. Attorney General Barr has deliberately misrepresented Mueller's report. 2. President Trump has engaged in impeachable conduct. 3. Partisanship has eroded our system of checks and balances. 4. Few members of Congress have read the report." What really strikes me the most out of all of this, not just that he said the I word as a Republican, but also this notion that few members of Congress have actually read the Mueller report. It would be quite interesting to find out who has and who hasn't. The special form of indictment does not even require probable cause that a crime, for example, obstruction of justice, has been committed. It simply requires a finding that an official has engaged in careless, abusive, corrupt, or otherwise dishonorable conduct. Also interesting, we had, again, Chris Wallace of Fox News say on television a bit about Attorney General Barr. He had this to say. He said that Attorney General Barr is, quote, "clearly protecting this president and advocating his point of view on a lot of these issues." Wallace also conceded that he thinks other lawyers are there who would say Barr was certainly not forthcoming to Congress about what he knew about Mueller's opinion. Now, I wouldn't characterize Wallace's attempt at objectivity here as a victory for holding Attorney General Barr or President Trump accountable. However, I do believe we must take note that Fox News, that old Trump-trained propaganda machine, doesn't, as far as I know, pressure or require its so-called journalists to entertain the notion that Barr is putting his strange and perplexing public relations protection of President Trump above honesty and justice. By the way, do any of you have a theory on the story here with Attorney General Barr? What exactly does he get out of working as another one of Trump's sycophants? I wonder, but don't have the grounds to quite suppose. It could be that Trump has some kind of blackmail on people like Attorney General Barr, Rudolph Giuliani, Rand Paul, Senator Lindsey Graham. Some of these people have strikingly changed their anti-Trump tune is why I ask. So what are we to make of the perplexing reluctance of Republicans and conservatives to stand up to President Trump with respect to virtually anything? Are we witnessing not just the cliche political corruption here, but true moral corruption? A swath of politicians, lobbyists, and pundits who have chosen to switch off their consciences as we find ourselves looking directly at evidence of President Trump's obstruction of justice, violation of the Emoluments Clause, cruelty perpetrated towards political asylum seekers, some of whom are children and babies, and this strange expression of admiration President Trump has for tyrants? I don't know. The psychology and their supposed pragmatics behind it truly arouse my curiosity. You may note I'm producing these vlogs a little differently now. I'm taking the time to write down what I want to say, even if I improvise or omit additional comments here or there. You may also note there is no podcast accompanying this vlog. I've been inspired, most of all, actually by Chris Hayes of MSNBC. He does his show 5 days a week. He's got his weekly podcast, and he writes the occasional article. I like that pace, so I'm adopting that approach. By the way, I highly recommend Chris Hayes' article, The First Presidential Impeachment, about the book, The Impeachers, which is about the impeachment of President Andrew Johnson back in 1868. Typically, commentators refer to Watergate when contemplating the prospects of a Trump impeachment, Watergate and Nixon. But I've been saying for months that we ought to consider the Andrew Johnson impeachment because I believe this may be one of the greatest examples of a president who appears to contrast the majority of plurality ethos of the country he or she is supposedly leading. So this question of how to approach this new world of digital media self-expression, it really fascinates me and excites me, but it also quite confuses me. It's a luxurious confusion, though. That is to say, even though I get frustrated over questions like how often I should vlog or podcast or post something on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc., I'm really quite privileged to probe these questions as opposed to asking how I'm going to afford dinner tonight, how I'm going to afford to feed my children, how am I going to afford my most basic healthcare needs, etc. These complexities of freedom in particular is a topic that has occupied my contemplations for over a decade now. In the miserable summer of 2007, I say that summer was miserable because it was the summer of my near homelessness in Tampa, where thanks to the charity of the man who owned the hostel I was staying in, I had a place to live and I had food to eat. This was when, for the first time in my life, it seemed to me that we possess this faculty of so-called free will. As the question, do I still think we have this thing called free will? I would call myself a soft determinist. I think we experience what feels like choice. That is to say, our minds inherently contemplate and land on an option, and our inclinations and knowledge would count as factors with respect to that choice. The choice as an action occurs, I believe, in our minds, but can we fight the deeper, more fundamental forces at play like genetics, biology, and physics that are all involved? I don't know. I don't think so. But my point is that my awareness of some sense of free will, which came to me 12 years ago now, has always complicated my approach to free productivity. By that I mean with a full sense of creative autonomy, whether it is a question of what do I want to be when I grow up, or now that I've decided what kind of artwork, product, or service providing business I want to produce, and now that I've found the confidence to do it my way, as opposed to being told how to do it, how then do I determine the specifics, the creative specifics of what I'm doing? So for example, this vlog, how long should it be? How often should it be done? Two things I try to keep in mind the most. Those I admire and how they approach these kinds of things, right? So I mentioned Chris Hayes before. And of course, context. This is something that totally slipped my mind over the last 2 weeks. For example, I believe it should have been obvious to me that videos require much more concentration and mental energy than, say, a podcast. So these hour-long talking head video blogs that I've been doing, I think it turns out to be quite irrational on my part. I think my stepfather characterized them as long-winded. I think he was right. They tend to be a bit too much, so I apologize for imposing all of that on you. And I think when I want to do that, when I want to go on and on, that would be more ideal for a podcast, as there would be more flexibility for the listener who can clean the house, drive to and from work, take a walk or run, exercise, etc. I can't get over how exciting this whole vlogging concept is to me, and the question of what it means to me to make the most out of it. I see various elements to it. I see it as a sort of open, public video journal. I see it as talking to the world or the universe, assuming this is preserved and that in the future people can watch this from their smartphones on a terraformed Mars or some space station out there. I also see this as something quite similar to the personal essay. In that sense, additionally, there is something quite artistic about this. So I took the advice that I got from, I can't remember which source it was, if it was a video blog or an article I read, but they said to make it more artistic, be mindful of background. So I'm trying to show you something more than just the plain white that I was doing. I'm trying to add to the context or depth of my personality. I'm curious though, do y'all prefer a plain white background or something which exudes more personality? Please let me know. And so that's all I want to say for today. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to watch, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.